All right, thanks for thank you. Awesome. Thank you for coming out today. We have an absolutely super exciting talk seminar tonight. Thanks for making it. For those of you who are new, this is Disruptive Thinkers, and we are a decentralized think tank made up of military and civilians. We do a lot of cool things. We get a lot of cool people to come talk to us and give us some great insights on how to do better business, make the world a better place, etc. A lot of folks, if you've seen the news today, bad stuff going on in Boston. So I'd like to just ask if we can observe a moment of silence for those that are suffering right now. Thanks. One of the things I like to do, and I think most of us are here to do, not just make money or do better work, but to try to find a way to make the world a better place. And design thinking is one of those cool ways I think you can really tap into your potential, your employees' potential, your coworkers' potential, and come up with better things. For me, being in the Navy, the ability to come up with ideas from the deck plates around the workers that are doing the job every day, rather than having it come from somebody far away who doesn't really have an idea of what's going on, is very powerful, and it's a really good way to give a person buy-in. So with that, let me just introduce Navrina Singh real quick. I first met Navrina Singh, or I first heard of her by listening to her at the Pacific Rim Innovation Symposium that the Navy held back in October, I think. And she spoke about Qualcomm and some of the innovation things that have going on there. And since that time, she's been very helpful with introducing some junior officers that are part of the Navy's Disruptive Thinkers group into some innovation techniques that Qualcomm does. And she's been very helpful with us. So please join me in welcoming Navrina Singh and Qualcomm Impact.
Good evening, everyone. It's honestly a delight to be here. We've been working with Jeff and team for a while, and it's really amazing to see that all the things that we're trying to do in Qualcomm, a lot of you are trying to do outside of the community as well. So before I get started, Jeff, how much time do we have?
We have 45 minutes to an hour or so.
So I do want to introduce my team, Joan Walkman. She's been with the company for over 20 years. She left for a little bit to join a startup, and now she's back as a consultant on my team. And Stephen Jordan here, who leads the operations and IT. Stephen joins us from Pfizer, where he did innovation for over 10 years. So my team, it's a really, really small team in the company. So what I want to do today is really give you a quick overview of what is Qualcomm Impact, why do we do what we do, what do we actually really, really care about. And also, Joan is going to be talking about some of the key things that our program brings to the table in terms of really managing people, because at the end of the day, there are two things I totally believe in, that you really got to invest in your people, because without them, you won't have the ideas, without them, you won't have the passion. But more importantly, a good idea is worth nothing without execution, and that's something that my team heavily focuses on. So Joan's going to be talking about that, and then we will have Stephen walking you through some of the design thinking principles. These have been actually shared with us from the IDEO team, which is a worldwide known, renowned design thinking firm. It's based in the Bay Area, and we work very extensively with them on our program. And design thinking is a very interesting way to figure out what kind of human-centered approach you can take to your products, to your businesses. And Stephen's going to walk you through that today, but he's going to give you a summary, and then we're going to have a follow-up session to actually make you dive deeper into the design thinking methodologies so that you can use those in your products and in your businesses. So with that, what is Qualcomm Impact? And one of the things that I like to do in my talks is really make it very interactive. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand or shout or do whatever and grab my attention, and I would love to make it really very interactive. And it's interesting, I just met these two ladies because I spoke at a Women 2.0 conference or an event 2 weeks back, and I'm like, oh my God, you guys are here. They're like, yeah, it's amazing to find like-minded people. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do with Qualcomm Impact. We're trying to find like-minded people in a big corporation like Qualcomm, which has 27,000 employees worldwide, and trying to provide them a platform so that they can have a visible voice in the company. So within our corporation, we have a lot of divisions, a lot of people, a lot of projects. And it's very difficult to really figure out what's happening in different parts of the company, what's happening in Japan, what's happening in India, what's happening in Israel, what's happening in Bay Area. It's very difficult. So if our company has to stay competitive and if they have to always come up with new innovative technologies, it's very important to provide a really interesting platform for employees to share their ideas. And really important is how can you take these ideas and bubble them to the top so that our leadership has access to it, because a big part of, I think, all these ideas is ownership. So if Jeff comes up with an idea, how can we attribute that idea to Jeff? If Joan comes up with an idea, how can we say that she came up with that brilliant idea that is going to take Qualcomm forward? So rewards and recognitions is a really key part of our program. So Qualcomm Impact is our internal innovation program in the company. And this is something that was started by our CEO about 6 years back. And his intent was essentially, how can I provide a visible voice to employees, irrespective of their title, irrespective of their position, irrespective of their location, irrespective of their division, and how can we get those ideas to be showcased to our leadership team. And he started something called the Qualcomm Innovation Network, which was a business plan competition that was held every year. And employees would come together, they would share their ideas, and over 3 months' time frame, build a business plan and showcase that business plan to the leadership. And then the leadership would decide who the winners are. And it was really cool because it was really getting people engaged. A lot of people in the company are very, very competitive, so they really wanted to get in and win. The point was, what happened over the years, it sort of distracted our company from what we really set out to accomplish. We set out to accomplish a couple of main things. How can we get ideas that can move Qualcomm forward? How can we bring relevant people to the platform to share ideas, to review ideas? And more importantly, how can we build something quickly? Because more than, I would say, 80%, 85% of our population is engineers. I come from an engineering background, though now I'm not doing any hardcore coding, but most of our population is engineers. So how can we give them a tinkering platform? So Qualcomm Innovation Network then morphed into what's now called Qualcomm Impact. And we launched this program last September. In our first go-round, we received over 270 ideas. And from those 270 ideas, we have certain filtering and review stages. We trickled it down to 80 ideas, which were reviewed by a set of experts. And those 80 ideas after that, we showcased it to our business unit leads, and right now we are prototyping 7 of them. And the reason I'm throwing out these numbers is anytime you do, at least in a big corporation, you do an innovation program, you always need to have metrics to showcase, is this even successful? Yay, you got people engaged, but what next? How is it adding value to our corporation? So numbers are really important, but I don't think they tell the whole story. What tells the whole story is the impact it's having on the people, and that's why it's the appropriate name, right? Is it the new hires that we are getting in the company, are they getting excited to stay in Qualcomm? Are the people who've been in the company for a while, do they get engaged and do they still come to work feeling like, oh my God, I can really change the world? And really important is for the business unit leads to feel they are getting compelling ideas that are going to drive Qualcomm forward. So that's basically what Qualcomm Impact is. With that, I would like to just invite Joan here to talk about some of the key elements of our program, especially focused on the people aspect, because one of the big things for our company and for this program is how can you not just keep people engaged, but how can you help them figure out a purpose, which I think is going to be really important even for this group. You guys are disruptive thinkers, and I think a big part of the disruption is having that passion to follow your dreams and to really create something that's going to be meaningful for the community. So Joan's going to talk about the people aspect a little bit, and then Stephen's going to be talking about design thinking.
Hi, everyone. So, I was trying to figure out what I could share with you guys that might apply to the broadest part of the audience. And I read this quote in an article that said, creativity is the price of admission, and innovation pays the bills. So when we talk about creativity, we can get ideas from anybody. And we knew that when we were going into it, but we also realized that with impact, we wouldn't actually be successful in the eyes of our sponsors if they didn't see results. And so part of what we've had to do in the program is find a way to connect people's creativity and their genuine desire to like be a part of something bigger than they are with how we could actually show that it could add to the bottom line ultimately. And one of the things we learned early on was that people that are in certain positions of authority currently have goals that are set for them by management. And if something aligns with those goals, then they're going to be more likely to adopt these creative ideas. So in starting out, before we can be really bold and sort of more out of the box, we had to give people things to work on that would naturally align with the stakeholders that they're going to be pitching these ideas to. And we have to help them understand that they will be the ones that are going to guide that idea until it gets picked up by somebody in the company, or we decide that we're not going to go forward. And then we have to be really genuine about our interest and how we talk to them and how we give them feedback. So those are kind of values at the core of the program. And so we started out with this notion of themes and getting people to think about what was important in the company. And why that's so important is, you know, when Qualcomm was founded, Erwin Jacobs, who was our founder, he sat down with a bunch of very brilliant people and they came up with a plan, and then they hired a lot of other people who cared about that plan, and they were all really passionate about doing that. And so execution was just about executing on a passion that they already shared. But once the company became 27,000 people, or any number in between, actually any number over a couple thousand, right, you start to actually see people coming in saying, okay, I got hired to do a job, and I don't know if I connect with the original point, but I'm going to do it. And so the desire to be really innovative around that meaning of the work starts to fade out. And so by using the thematic approach, we're able to actually get people more engaged again. And one thing I wanted to share with you guys was we have this kind of mantra in the group, because we realized that with 27,000 people, you're going to have certain people that are actually opposed to certain types of innovation because they might feel threatened by it. And even as we're trying to use these themes to connect everybody back together again, if it doesn't suit certain aspects of their authority, then it might be seen as a threat to where that, you know, limited funding could go. And oh, you're not spending it on my project because you're spending it over here. Well, maybe I need to oppose that. So we have these words that describe the different folks that are kind of in our customer base, or our clients, you might say, as the employees. So the first one is the sponsors. Those are the people that asked us to put the program together, and they're naturally on our side because they have something at stake. The second is the enthusiasts. Those are the people that really want an outlet for their creativity, and they're naturally already going to be predisposed to supporting you. And if they're a manager, great, that always helps. But if they're an employee, also great. We want everybody at every level involved. And one thing we had to do is we had to go out in the beginning and really search for who our enthusiasts were. Because if we didn't have those employees helping us with our sponsors, then the program wouldn't take off from the very beginning. So once you have your enthusiasts and you've built kind of that trust up, then you can start to seek out your advocates. People that are going to come on board and say, hey, you know, I wasn't sure, but I kind of like that, and now that I've seen the program and you put it out there, I'm in, and I'm going to participate as well. So your advocates become a really important part of the group that's now going to send the message for you and help you scale the program. The problem comes in when you hit the fence sitters and the dark siders. So the fence sitters are the people that just don't want to commit. Right? And they're like, I don't know, I got my data, that looks like a risk. Maybe people won't like it, I'm just going to watch. And because they're just watching and they're not advocating, that actually might sometimes look like a dark sider. So you need those advocates to try to drive those fence sitters over into your corner so that they don't become that, because they're not going to sit on the fence forever. Eventually they will form an opinion. And finally you get to the dark siders. Okay, so those are the people that can kill you, right? Those are the people that want anything but your program and see it as a possible threat, or they may have a competing agenda. And we actually built the program for the evangelists and the advocates. And we realized that there were going to be darksiders. But we also realized if we try really hard to get the darksiders on our side, and we don't let the crowd do it for us, then we're probably going to fail from the start. So we didn't focus on them. And in fact, it's kind of funny, but as the programs gained in popularity, more and more people have started talking about how well this is a worthwhile project. People are starting to get recognized. Those outcomes are leading fence sitters to come over and say, okay, maybe it's okay. And then the darksiders become less popular in their opinion, and they naturally have to figure out what they're going to do. But it becomes a smaller and smaller percentage over time if you just keep pushing on the right things that the company needs to do. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was when we get ideas into the system, we have to recognize how our different stakeholders that might bring the idea into the group are going to see it. So there's two kinds of ideas. There's two buckets you can put them in. One we call intrinsic motivators, and the other one we call hygiene factors. Okay, so why this is important is because intrinsic motivators are ideas that people naturally see are going to really improve things or make something better, or it's like, wow, I love that. That is so cool. That could just add to my bottom line. It's something that's so much better than what we were doing. Or we could start a new group off of that. And people see like a lot of promise in it. So there's all this upside. And there's actually, hopefully, very little downside into it. So with a motivator, when you think about like these creative ideas or disruptive ideas coming in, if you think of a motivator, you've thought of something that's really going to help to change the needle on the positive side. Okay, so what about this other side, which is called the hygiene factor? So hygiene factors are actually super important because a hygiene factor can kill you if done wrong. And so it's sort of like company policies on sexual harassment. Okay, like there's a lot of company policies, and we all have to be aware of it. And if you do it wrong, it can be really bad, and we don't want that showing up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. But if you spend a huge amount of money on a hygiene factor and you do it so well that nobody's better at this in the world than you, it doesn't do you any good. There's no upside. So the important thing of a hygiene factor is you can get those ideas in too, and you just have to understand where to position them. It's like, wow, that's a great insurance policy. That's going to help me a lot avoid downside risk. And that risk could actually kill you if it's really bad. But don't go overboard to where you don't get any benefit out of it, because it's actually not going to help with the needle. Okay, finally, I just wanted to share that you know, I've been through a lot of change management programs, and anytime something's disruptive, it's a challenge to get other people on board. And I've watched situations where there has to be almost a catastrophic event, as I'm sure you've all experienced, before people will actually participate in a new way of thinking. So there's kind of like a 5-step program for this. And so I just wanted to share this with you. And the first step is that the stakeholder that you're dealing with has to find themselves dissatisfied with the current model of practice. So if you don't find that they're dissatisfied, the chances are of accepting a disruptive idea is probably not going to happen. But if you can find a way where they do see it as not satisfactory anymore, then it actually can get you through step 1. The second step is recognizing that there is something that can be made better. Like, oh yeah, you're right. I actually would like it if that table were on the other side of the building, and we reorganized all these conference rooms and did things a new way. Maybe it is worth remodeling this room. But before I didn't even realize it was a problem, but now I realize it's possible to make it better. For more engagement, or whatever it is. You have to like have them believing that there's an opportunity. And thirdly, they have to understand how it can actually happen. So besides like believing in all that, there has to be a way for them to see, oh, okay, I get it. These are the steps that we would take to do it. And then they have to envision themselves actually participating in it. Because if they think for some reason that that would happen, and they would be left out, they're not going to be okay with it. So what's interesting is once they do believe that they're part of the change, and they believe in it, and they understand how it could happen, then they can become advocates themselves. But until that happens, until they realize that that problem is worth solving and it's not satisfactory the way it is, they'll probably stay on the other side, either as a fence-sitter or a dark-sider. And so all of these things can be done through implied power. And I talk a lot about sort of the difference between implied power and position power because, you know, position power seems like such a great thing to have in a corporation because you can just tell them what to do. But you don't get real advocacy and loyalty through position power. You get obedience. And so I think what's really amazing is when the right ideas come together, people are inspired and they really believe in something, and that implied power leads to amazing changes happening, and this disruption actually can take place.
I think before we like to take questions, and the reason we didn't show you a slide deck of what our process is, how we do things in the company, it's not anything unique. I think the key thing that makes Impact successful is the people that are part of it. And a lot of these learnings I know cannot, maybe they're not directly applicable to where you are in your corporation, but for Navy, for example, a lot of what we're doing in Impact, I think, can be replicated, especially for the business you're trying to do. You always have to understand the advocates and the dark-siders that you might have who might not believe in your idea. So I think the goal for this first part of the talk was essentially just to share with you some common elements of innovation programs, and what we do in our corporation may or may not fit for yours. So we'll take questions. John, you want to come up here? Okay, go ahead. I just want to get you here.
So we're trying to put in the 27,000 person organization, a culture of innovation and execution of that innovation, right? You have metrics on how many projects you, ideas you get, and then turn into projects.
Right.
Do you have any metrics or ways of measuring culture? So you've got sponsors, advocates, fence-sitters, dark-siders. Over time, can you measure what percentage of your workforce fits in those categories? And ultimately, I think, you know, if you force that percentage of advocates, you'll have the culture. You have that metric.
Okay, so, you know, I think a lot of people do play climate surveys. But what's interesting is the climate survey usually tells the managers what they want to hear. Because people know how to answer those things, right? And so what we've done is we've actually created this big network of people that, from the advocate pool, that actually give us feedback about how people are really experiencing it. And what we're doing is we're going to do our own survey, and I don't think people are necessarily going to know what we want to hear, so hopefully it'll be like more honest and genuine feedback.
Hopefully they'll take it.
And they'll take it, and they won't just like put it in the little trash can in their email. But I think what's interesting is the emails that we get from people who have discovered the program, are participating, and genuinely want to share with us why this matters so much in their life. And then we back it up with data, like we have this program called Invention Disclosures. And what that is that when you have a new idea, you can go online and you put it in. And then we have a group of people that are specialists in reviewing the idea to see if it's worthy of patenting and that kind of thing, or keep it as a trade secret. And within the context of the program, we've at least inspired enough people within the course of what we've run so far that we've had more invention disclosures than ever before in a program of this nature at Qualcomm. So right now, I would say our metrics are, somewhat soft, but given the advocacy we're getting and the fact that we can measure in terms of projects that are moving on to being prototyped and the invention disclosures, I think it's a pretty good sign that people are starting to adopt.
So it's another interesting thing, like every time there's an all hands in our company or when we would go to conferences, people would say, oh, we don't have data, but we got this email that was so powerful. And I would always laugh at those leaders and oh my God, they don't have any metrics, seriously. And now we are on the other side, and honestly, every email that we get saying that, oh, I'm new to the company and this program has inspired me to think beyond my current job and to do things that not only will impact the company, but help me impact the world. And we receive a lot of those. We actually document each and every one of them. Because the key thing is at the end of the day, you can show number of ideas, how many projects got formed, how many IDFs we filed, what kind of patents came out of it, the quality of ideas, and we use all these metrics and we show participation rates, we show involvement from different divisions, we have metrics around all this. But at the end of the day, just getting those emails and getting feedback from some of our sponsors and from our enthusiasts saying, oh, you know what, Impact did it for me and I'm actually more creative and more engaged at work, that's a powerful measure for us. But we have no way to show it other than emails. Does that answer your question?
It's a hard thing to measure. That's why I asked you. Do you have a way to do it?
You would want to know it.
Yeah.
I'll just start with one couple of questions. So are you guys going to roll this outside of the company? Are you thinking about it as purely internal? And why did you decide to build one as opposed to purchase at least one from Idea Connection or Open IDEO or Innovation Exchange or there's 10 companies that do this sort of thing?
So I'll answer your second one first. So we are using an IT platform internally, but that's not what is Impact completely. IT platform is used just for getting the ideas and for managing the workflow of ideas, and we use a platform called Spigot, which is extensively used in the industry. And to your first question, we actually do this already externally as well. We have a program, we are part of a group called Qualcomm Labs, and we have a partnership with EvoNexus. So how many of you know about EvoNexus? Okay, that's good. So what we do with EvoNexus is we do a call for ideas every quarter, and we send that out to our entrepreneur community, and then we look for submissions that come in. We have a similar filtering and review process, and then we pick 3 to 4 ideas that Qualcomm funds. And the goal there is either we have an IP share in that idea that we funded or equity share based on the kind of ideas that we get. So we already do this externally. It's not under the Impact name. It's under Qualcomm Labs EvoNexus partnership name.
Right. But you're saying what you're doing is kind of separate and beyond Spigot or one of these other ideation platforms.
Yeah, because there's an element to managing ideas. The second part is actually implementing those ideas.
Right.
So we have a prototyping stage in our program where for 3 months time frame, the ideas that have been selected get prototyped, and the angel investment comes from our CEO because that's how we are funded. For 3 months, they get this angel investment, and at the end of the 3-month period, they show their prototypes to a bunch of executives or to our leadership team, and a decision is made how we want to scale these ideas within the company, and then they get actual VC funding, and you can think about it as Series A, Series B, etc. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
How do you inspire people to upload a new idea to the site or to your collection?
That's very interesting because I think one of you mentioned here that how do you create a culture of innovation? We really have a very strong culture of innovation because we hire really smart people from all across the board, be it in engineering or be it in business. So to inspire them, you have to show them something that Joan was talking about. They have to see your vision. And I think a lot of people that we hire into the company really do identify with the vision that our founders have set and also the vision that Qualcomm has. Like honestly, something that I always share is this phone literally is a brick without our technology. And just imagine the power of you being able to connect the rest of the planet just using your technology. I think that's a very powerful vision. So in our company, we have a lot of motivated people. It's interesting, when we launched the program last year, I was like freaking out our first day. I'm like, oh my God, we're not going to get any ideas. What are we going to do? Oh my God, oh my God. 3 months, we get 270 ideas. So I honestly don't see that there's a dearth of people who don't want to share their ideas. I think the challenge happens is when you get so many ideas, how can you turn people away and say, you know, you need to work more on your idea because they get so married to their idea. And sometimes you have to isolate the reality from their vision of their idea. And the reality sometimes doesn't align with Qualcomm's goals. So I think that's the challenging part. But do you want to add something to that, Joan?
Well, one of the things we try to do is help people understand that they can trust our program, because I think a lot of people, when they're sharing an idea, they feel like they're sharing something that is part of them, that they spend months to come up with, and if I share it with you, it's no longer mine. And so what we had to do is help them understand that you will be the advocate for your idea. You will get credit for it, and you will be rewarded for it. And every step along the way, if we at any point disrupted that trust, I think that would spread faster than the fact that we have a program. Yeah. So there's this whole consistency aspect of running this program and the culture we're trying to create and getting people engaged in solving real problems for the company where they can feel like what they're saying is actually going to make a difference. That all goes into whether or not they'll participate.
Can you talk more about your enthusiasts, like identifying those people within the company? Are they like your individual contributors or department heads or a mixed bag of both? How does that work? How do you like?
I think it's actually a mix of both, because and how do we find them? They come to us, honestly. So again, we've created an environment where you feel safe to share your ideas, and we've actually made it very transparent. So going back to your question about why we're using Spigot or what IT tools we're using, the cool thing about Spigot is when you submit an idea, you know who's reviewing it, what kind of feedback you're getting, you know how your idea is progressing, and there is some sort of like, you feel like confident that at least your idea is progressing, or if it's been closed, we provide feedback back to the idea submitter saying, oh, by the way, it was reviewed by these many reviewers and this is their feedback. Let us know if you have any questions. So some of the idea submitters, going back to my previous point, they do come back and say, I don't agree with it. So we work with them to provide them a platform that they can prove their idea, and then we can take it back to the reviewers. So it's all about really creating that trust. Creating that shared vision is really important, because if you're part of Titanic and you're like hidden somewhere in a cabin and you don't know where the ship is going, it's very difficult to have a joint vision of the captain. So I think through our teams, what we are trying to really take to our employees is, you know, these are the areas that matter to our community, and these are the areas that matter to Qualcomm. So you can now join forces to help us expand that vision. Do you have anything to say to that?
You know, like Navarina said, a lot of times people will come forward when they start hearing about the program because they naturally gravitate to participating in these sorts of things. It's funny, but you actually hear from both ends of the spectrum, right? You hear from the people that didn't want it and why it's a bad idea, and then you hear from the people that really want it and want to help make it happen. And like Navarina said, it comes from all over the company. But the ones that you want to encourage to like speak out for you kind of are at every level. And so it's good that they're from all over the company, because you need that sort of networking to start happening early on.
And just to add to that, one of like a lot of corporate programs you'll hear is like, we want more ideas, and actually that's not the end goal of our program at all. I don't even emphasize getting a lot of ideas. Quantity is not important to us. Quality is extremely important. So one of the things that we are really trying to do through our program is educate our employees and keep them informed. Whether they come and share their idea, it's completely their discretion. But by sharing research modules, by sharing information about projects happening within the company and things happening outside the company, we are providing them all the knowledge, and after that, it's their discretion what they want to do with that knowledge. And even if they take it back to the projects that they're working on, that's actually a huge success for us as well. Yeah.
So one of the things we noticed was a lot of the people that were the most enthusiastic about it were dissatisfied, that they really felt things could be better. And they wanted for more people to bring new, fresh ideas to the table. And a lot of the people that didn't necessarily think we did it were very satisfied. And everything's fine. And why do we need to do this? Because what would a new idea do? We can do that ourselves already. So, you know, to that earlier point, you have to have a level of dissatisfaction to be willing to throw a new idea in there and be somewhat disruptive. We found that very early on with people that wanted to support us.
So I think we'll take one last question. I'm so sorry, but I know Stephen needs a little bit of time. So you guys decide who wants to take the last question.
First, I want to thank you and your welcome that you are thinking outside the box, that they are asking people who does not work directly or indirectly welcome, but still you want to help us. I appreciate it very much. Now the question is your impact, that how the people like we are not computer engineers, we are not brilliant business engineers, but we still have an idea. And it may not be directly related to the welcome, but definitely indirectly. So we help those idea too.
So, you know, that's a very interesting question because we do a lot of community partnership, but through our Even Access program, we have received ideas which are not all technology ideas. So if you think that you have an interesting business model idea, but you need a team to help it take forward, you can certainly pitch that in Even Access. But directly working with Impact, unfortunately, we don't have that direct connection available right now. So, so through discussions like this, we can certainly have a conversation to see where it can go. But generally, Qualcomm is really interested in either funding startups or partnering with them. We do a lot of M&A activities as well, but we don't have like a direct path with Impact for these conversations. Yeah. I will take your question because one of the things that I'm really passionate about, and I have to throw it out there, I'm really interested in getting more women into STEM and really getting more women to voice their opinion. And there's a reason for it because in our program, out of 167 idea submitters who submitted 270 ideas, we had 7 female, 5 or 7 female. Now think about that. That's horrible stats. And there's a reason behind it. So I would encourage all of you to lean in if you get a chance. But there is a dearth of women in startups and in technology field and in business areas. So I certainly want to take your questions. So.
My question around the percentage of ideas that you get that are sustained before versus actual step change disruption.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see more of sort of sustaining the core versus that next generation that's actually going to drive the business forward.
So before I answer that, one of the things that we spend a lot of time on, and I spoke at Pacific Rim about it, was what is innovation, right? And a lot of times big programs or big corporations fail because they don't identify what innovation is for them. So we spend a bunch of time, actually, Joe and myself, we spend months trying to figure out what does innovation mean to us and how do we want to create this program. We decided very early on for us, it's really about solving challenging problems, but with the end goal of driving growth for Qualcomm. So it can be very incremental innovation, and sometimes it can be disruptive. So what we did in our first go round, just to get a little bit success with the program so that we can build that trust and we can build a good solid base of advocates, we picked themes which were very close to the core. And when you pick areas which are very close to the core, you will not get disruptive innovations, right? So, but what we are getting is really interesting ideas that are really useful to our core, which is our main business, right? So for the next set of themes, what we are doing is we'll keep certain as the same themes, but we start introducing one new blue sky kind of idea or theme so that we start getting people prepped for thinking beyond the core and start getting new ideas. So we will have stats for you like by the end of this year on how that goes, but for the first go round, we literally had, I would say, very close to home ideas, and for, I would say, more than 99% were incremental. Yeah.
Do you see anything as the reviewers are looking at the ideas? Is there any great combination that you guys would be able to do? So a lot of, I mean, all the literature says that it happens in the gray space. So are you able to actually, one idea in isolation is probably insufficient, but the two ideas together are better? Have you been able to do any of that matching?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, a lot of what we've seen is people have interesting ideas that can't get on the roadmap because people just don't have time to see the value of them. But they actually have a significant chance of improving the current roadmap. So what we're trying to do is foster those within our group and then add them into the current businesses. And that's seen as a way for us to get our sponsors to say, yeah, this program's working. Because in the beginning, if they don't see any direct benefit into the businesses, then they have more concerns than I think they have support. So one of the things we try to do is focus on getting people to understand what the program is about, what the actual things are that are important to Qualcomm, because a lot of people have forgotten, and then take those ideas, match up different inventors that had come up with things that are similar, match up different inventors with programs that are already out there that are adjacent, and then also enhance the current roadmaps. And there were a couple of ideas that were definitely, so out of the box that people said, wow, we've never seen something like this before, and that would go really well in this group. And for those few that came in that way, we're like really proud that those came out, because I think those people would have never shared it if it wasn't for the
So I think we'll pass it on to Steven. We will go a little bit over time, but trust me, it's going to be worth your time to learn about design thinking, and then we'll do a full-blown workshop on that. Steven?
So how much time do we have?
As much as you need. We can after the talk is over, we can break off if you need to leave. We can go early, but yeah, if you.
Okay, I'm gonna walk back and forth. So
give us as much as you can, please.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, people can leave if they need to.
So as Narita said, I've worked in innovation for quite a while, probably 6 or 7 years full time, in employee innovation programs. And the face of that is normally the spigots of the world, right? It's social problem solving is what I used to call it, crowdsourcing. So I run dozens and dozens of business unit department campaigns and challenges, and we did the first 110,000 person challenge at Pfizer across the whole company. We did that for a couple of years. Then came here to help get the impact challenge off the ground. That stuff's really hard. We could talk for a long, long time about it. I think a lot of the things outside of the culture that we talked about were how do you make a program like that work across geographies with an IT platform. And I can say that I did that. It was like the coolest place in corporate America to work because you're working on innovation and we were incorporating social media. I got to go to Argentina for 6 months. I got to live in Africa for 6 months, all this great stuff. And the 2 best days I've ever had in my career were doing design thinking. One when I was a participant for 2 days at Pfizer, and one was literally 3 weeks ago where we had some high school kids come through and we did a 3-hour design workshop overview. So this is going to be 15 minutes and we can do something later on as a workshop. And even at 3 hours, I mean, you're just kind of getting a taste for how this works. I'll say I'm not an expert in this. I've done it a fair amount, but the people at IDEO, the slide you're going to see, they're amazing at it. And they're people that spend their entire lives, their entire careers doing this, whether they're psychologists or product designers or engineers. They do this full time. They'll tell you, they'll kind of cringe when you say, I'm going to do a 3-hour workshop on this. They're like, what are you going to cover in 3 hours, right? So this is just like the disclaimer before I get going. So, but I think that's really powerful. And the people, just as sort of an anecdote, the people that went through that session 3 weeks ago, I'm still seeing them at stores, out in restaurants, and they're giving me hugs like, I broke down in that session and I started crying with these kids as they were telling them about this thing that I didn't realize was important to me. And these insights came out of that were pretty amazing. So I want to preface that because some of this can seem like a little bit dry, but this is what you wish you could do all the time. You can take all 27,000 people at the company and get them together and break them out and do this face-to-face. You wish you could just do this because it's so powerful. And then when you can't, and you've got a geographically dispersed workforce across time zones, you try to bring software to bear to try to help make that happen. So what we try to do in Impact is kind of marry the two. Where we can we get people face-to-face and bring these types of techniques to bear? And when we can't, all the time, can we have this sort of always-on innovation capability where we can connect people across the globe? So again, these slides are from IDEO, who are really awesome at this. If you haven't met them, they're like, you sit through one of their sessions and they just rock. I mean, the facilitators are awesome. But so I'm going to be going through some slides, and I put a few in on my own. This is what we did for the previous agenda with the kids that I talked about. So we made it into 3 sessions. All we're going to talk about here is the overview today. But what we did was we actually brought in people to sit through interviews for 45 minutes to an hour so that they could ask them questions around the topic at hand. And based on the notes that they took, then we would get together and draw out insights, and we'll talk about that, and brainstorm around those insights. So we didn't just put people together and say, start brainstorming about this. And that's typically what happens, right? You're like, let's have a brainstorming session. There's something going on, we need to figure out how to fix it. So you throw a bunch of people in a room, and you start brainstorming. Or worse, you throw out a spigot platform and say, let's not give them any guidance whatsoever. We didn't do that, of course. But that's worst case. Let's just throw it up there and see what sticks and have people start submitting ideas. What we did is we said, let's first do the storytelling. Let's get to know people and understand what makes them tick, the human factor side of this. And then we'll start brainstorming ideas once we understand what it was they were telling us, what themes we drew out. So the ground rules that we ran through, and this is an IDEO slide, is that everybody's a designer. So if you think you're not creative, if you think you're not artistic, if you don't think you have any good ideas, I'm a finance person, I'm an actuary, I don't think creatively, I'm analytical. What we find is that you're all customers, right? Like it could be a product that you use and you have an amazing idea or amazing feedback for that. So they're big on this as their #1 rule, and I think it's why it's their #1. Is leave your role at the door. Whatever you do, forget it. You're a designer today, right? And it takes a little bit. One of the things that I think is important throughout all this is to get good at running these sessions, and I'm just like kind of getting there. When you see someone like IDEO, they're just, to get people in that mindset it's not something you can just throw on a slide and say, let's move on. It's a constant struggle. It's a constant battle. You're getting people to suspend disbelief and play the role of a designer for the session. We get this a lot. We're an engineering company, and at Pfizer, we were a bunch of scientists, chemists, and biologists that are trained to distrust everything, be skeptical, say, prove it, right? That'll never work because of this law, it won't work, right? That's the one way, whether it's on a spigot or a brainstorming session, you kill it instantly. It's one of the reasons that when we presented our ideas to see who would take them, there's a really ingenious idea that came out of this group to do it as a silent auction so that people couldn't all get together and start shooting it down right away and talk each other out of the ideas. What we found was a normal distribution of people that thought, oh, it's crazy at the end. So people saying, this is the best idea I've ever heard. You'd never get that. So what they want to do is keep you optimistic. There may be problems with it, and there'll be a time to move to reductionist thinking, but while we're in this session, we want to kind of greenhouse. We want to let the ideas grow. Have fun, which I'll just go back to my statement that it's the 2 best days I've had in my professional career with doing this. So usually people don't have trouble having fun once they get into it. It can be a little bit tough to get started, but by the end, they don't want to stop. Well, you know that. This is the classic thing. So in terms of design thinking, what kind of separates it is that it's a very empathetic approach where you're trying to leave your own biases at the door. You're trying not to project. You're trying not to ask questions, lead people, criticize, or judge. You're trying to understand by observing people in the real world. You're trying to really get inspiration from them, right? The trick there sometimes, notice what others don't, you have to listen to them, right? There's a huge thing here and when they talk, don't assimilate it into your head and say, okay, well, now I know what they mean, so let me keep going, right? You have to kind of check that at the door, write it down, and that's why we say you just kind of take notes, observe, and over time you'll notice things that others don't. It eventually looks to try to find patterns. You're talking about the gray space, right? Where you might hear this idea that doesn't make a lot of sense, or you hear something that they're saying that doesn't make a lot of sense, but they said something else. And neither one of them together really meant anything, but you put them together, and it's like, wow, that's what this whole thing is all about. I have an example of that I'll get to in a little bit. What you do with this is you are very experimental, so you want to, when you think about what you're hearing and the notes that you're coming in, you want to try to see what sticks, make things tangible, ask questions in a different way, take something and spin it, take a statement that was made, rephrase it into a question, and try to discover and experiment with what that person might be saying, and eventually one of those things will just stick. It's obviously collaborative, and this is what's interesting is when you get into brainstorming, or you get into market research, or you get into even crowdsourcing with a tool like Spigot, it's all diverge, converge, right? So you get the lone innovator is the person who's submitting his or her idea, right? Now, we definitely try to bring collaborative tools to bear. So it could be as simple as voting and commenting. It could be team formation. We could get the groups together in a room and brainstorm, right? We make it collaborative. But there is this sort of myth of some like crazy genius in a garage just hacking away, and that's the only way that innovation happens. And this is definitely like the antithesis of that, right? It's completely collaborative. And again, it's optimistic, right? Things don't make sense. Sometimes you can be, let's say you're looking at, you want to know something about contextual awareness in a smartphone, and someone's just talking about something that has nothing to do with that when you're interviewing them. And it feels like it's never going to get you where you need to go. You just have to be optimistic and say, this is how the design process works, right? Eventually, we're going to understand this person. We're going to understand where he or she is coming from, and we're going to start to realize that there are insights there that we can use later on in the process. So the main thing here is that it's human-centered, right? So you start with insights about people, right? User desirability, if you're thinking about designing for users, which is what folks like IDEO really do well. Then you look and you say, okay, well, are there needs there, right, that represent opportunities, right? Is there an unmet need that no one's realized yet? And then you start to get into that kind of reductionist thing. You're saying, well, what are the ideas we can come up with from in this case, technology, that can kind of address all of those, right? What you don't want to do, and you see happen a lot, is I've got this technology, right? It's awesome, and I just need use cases for how I can use it, right? It doesn't work that way. Maybe you'll get lucky, but it's not systematic. It's not going to yield you consistent results. So this is the difference between this process and some of the others that you might be familiar with in terms of how you do human-centered design. And it's why we bring in real, living, breathing people to interview in these processes. So this is what we would normally do. There's an observation and storytelling section. Then we get the people together, and there's some synthesis that we do. So we say, okay, what did we hear? Let's do some clustering. Let's take notes. Oh, this person said this. Well, were they really saying that? I really thought they meant this. No, and keep going down. So one example would be, we did it. This was not something that our company, Pfizer, was actually doing. It was an example, but it was talking about the difference between pharmaceuticals and health and beauty, right? And so we thought, well, could you get into the health and beauty business, right? So in that business, you really only have to prove that something's safe. It doesn't actually have to work, right? Nutraceuticals are that way. In pharma, it has to be safe, and it has to work, and not just work, it has to work better than what's already approved, or else it doesn't get approved, no one's going to pay for it. Well, with health and beauty, nutraceuticals, it has to be safe, and you can kind of make some claims. So somebody said, well, why don't we get into that? And so they brought in these folks, and the amazing thing was it took probably 3 20-minute interviews. And then a few of us got together, so it was probably 6 or 8 people that had been interviewed. And they were everyone from transsexuals to herbalists to race car drivers. I mean, they just went across the entire spectrum. And what we found was, consistently, particularly in women, we started listening to what they said about, I don't want to get old. I'm willing to spend my money on this. I'm willing to spend my money on that. And the insight that came out was, people don't want to spend their money on products that help them live longer. They want to spend money on products that help them look younger longer. Right? We never would have gotten to that if we hadn't gone through that process. And it wasn't just me listening and doing it, it was a collaborative process. So that's why we do that. Once we had that synthesis, we started thinking about brainstorming. What could we do in that process that would come up with ideas? And in this case, it might be something like marketing slogans. There was another one that a company, I probably can't tell the story because of the IP, but a gas company was looking for ways to do a marketing campaign for additives. And one of the companies used an approach and came up with Techron, right? You probably know that company. Very mechanical and really technical idea. The other company went through a design thinking process, and they found that the people who they interviewed that were really willing to spend money on their vehicles, right? This because they're saying that we'll get them to come in and maybe even spend a few cents more. The ones that, there were a lot of people that just, I don't care. I'm going to go wherever it's cheaper, which I can take a right instead of a left because I hate taking lefts in my car, right? There were people that would spend money. And the ones that would spend money, the insight they got was they don't just want their car to live a long time. They think of their car as a living organism. When they want it to last a long time, they don't care. When they want it to live a long time, they'll pay for it. So they came up with invigorate, because it's a very biological term, right? And that's another thing that wouldn't have happened had they not been out and interviewed people and made these insights. Now, whether that worked as a product, who knows? But that's the process that they went through. So I think one of the things that people ask sometimes, what's the difference between market research and human factors research? And there's a perception that people like one or the other, and they're sort of like one of these technique wars. But in fact, and IDEO will say this, they're completely complementary techniques, and both are really necessary, right? So you need to understand your market. There was a question about new products versus kind of incremental innovation, right? Market research a lot of times comes up with ways to improve existing products, right? It's kind of incremental because you're looking at your market, your demographic, you're looking at how they spend money, you figure out how you might be able to tweak your product slightly. Human factors oftentimes inspires new ideas because you're gaining insights about human behavior that will guide product decisions before someone else is. And you might understand a latent need that no one's in your blue ocean. You can address that with technology. It doesn't mean that there's no overlap here, but the goals of each one and what their kind of sweet spots are slightly different. So an example was that IDEO used was the market research wouldn't have shown you the roundup idea. I don't know if you guys know this, where it like dumps money back into your account. So they were following around, I think the story goes, and I may have this slightly wrong, but they were following around people who were actually using their checkbooks. And they would basically make their transaction, and then they would round up their checkbook to make it look like they had spent more. So it looked like they had less money, so there'd be more savings over time. And it had nothing to do with their ATM cards. It had nothing to do with really anything that they were researching. And they said, wow, this is a brilliant idea. We'll do a keep the change program, or whatever you want to call it, where we'll round it up for you automatically and dump it into a savings account, right? And that happened because they were interviewing people and following them around and doing human factors research. And by the way, jump in if you have questions in the middle of it. Again, market research focuses on kind of existing explicit needs. Human factors tries to uncover latent needs. I put this in, and maybe it's not a good example, but if you were, let's say, I spent time in Africa. If you were in Africa, you might notice that people were demanding brighter screens. And the market might tell you that they're selling better, these brighter screens. And so you're thinking, okay, well, how are we going to, bill of materials is going to go up. I guess we could do a LED screen, and are they playing games, or what's going on? And then you like go and visit them, and they're all going like this because they can't see it, like because there's no lights. So you can put in like a 10-cent super bright LED flashlight, and you've now got a product that outcompetes the competition, right? Again, wouldn't have found that out if they hadn't gone beyond just the data and talked to people and found out where they were really using it. So market research obviously uses controlled settings. Human factors tries to visit natural context. So this is an example where you can imagine somebody, you see a single, maybe a single mother who's working, and she might say on a survey or a market research that I'm not a very good multitasker, or I don't have time for things when I'm taking care of my child. And then you go visit, and you're like, this is the best multitasking person I've ever seen in my entire life. She's doing 5 things at once, right? And based on that, you can take that for what it is. That may have something really interesting to tell you about the segment that you're trying to enter. Market research definitely does look for target groups, like the 18 to 35 male for some sporting products. Human factors learns from the extremes. So this might have nothing to do with automobiles, but or if you're an oil change like Jiffy Lube, you may not want to study all the other people that are in your demographic. You might not want to say, like, let me go to Lube Express and all these things and benchmark myself. You probably do that to understand your business. But if you want to learn how to do it better, you might go study a Formula One team who has like 8 seconds to do a complete change of everything on the car, right? And based on what you learn from talking to them, you might figure out how to operate your business more efficiently. And then finally, market research. Again, they're both good. It's very objective analysis. And human factors is really more about empathetic experiences. So again, this is one I put in. I don't know if it's great, but you might be someone in a luggage company and your zippers aren't holding up, right? And you might realize, well, gosh, what is it that's going on? Is there something wrong with the supply chain? I'm making this up, by the way, but this is like an example. What you might do is you might end up thinking that you've got supply chain problems, you need to change suppliers, you've got to change fabrics or something. Then you go visit someone, you realize that they're like just stuffing it to the gills and trying to zip it. And you realize why it's breaking, and you talk to them and you say, well, why are you doing this? I don't want to bring 2 suitcases. Well, why? Is it because the problem carrying? No, I don't want to have to pay to check my luggage when I get on the plane. So you realize that your zippers are being broken because of a policy change, because now they're charging you to check bags, right? Maybe there's nothing wrong with your supply chain. But this might give you ideas for how to make a better suitcase, because you now understand what's motivating people, right? So that's really the design thinking overview. Because what we would normally do at this point is, once people start to kind of buy into it, is we would try to bring real living, breathing people in, break people up into small groups, and generally you have some kind of topic at hand. Like for us, it might be around some of our themes. We could say something again around, we want to do something about wearable computing. I don't know, everyone's talking about watches and stuff. And we want to understand about how to enter that market. So we would bring people together, we'd break into teams, and we would talk to people across this spectrum, right? And we would interview them, and there's a whole process here where you don't just say, tell me about wearable computing, right? Tell me about yourself. What do you do? You learn about the person. You start to understand and empathize with that person. And then over time, you can kind of bring so you travel all the time. Do you wear a watch now? No. Do you use your phone? Does that bother you? Like, what do you do if you want to know the time on a plane? You start asking these types of questions and take notes. And again, the next steps then are you break together into your teams and synthesize your notes. And sometimes what we do is we'll take all the teams and get them together to compare notes so that they get shared insights. Sometimes we won't do that. We'll just, to make it faster, we'll have it, especially if it's something like we want to have an example of this, come up with insights, start brainstorming for new product ideas, right? Once you understand those platforms. And then you can move into prototyping and presentations. So that's kind of it's a ridiculously fast overview, but hopefully it's kind of gives you a feel for like the difference between maybe the way that you would normally go about trying to brainstorm by just jumping in, or the way that you try to understand about a market for a new product, right? How those are 2 complementary techniques and what makes this one special. Any questions? Yeah?
It seems like there's a lot of overlap between the lean startup and the human factors research approach. And I was wondering, when you're talking about, you culled down your ideas and now you're focused on executing, do you use lean startup internally in Qualcomm as part of the impact group? And if not, are you using the human factors research sort of iteratively as you're executing?
Do you want to talk about lean startup?
So we actually, you've heard of Brent Cooper, right? So we worked with him on the previous program, because one of the things that we really try to bring to impact is how can we build something quickly but iterate often. Unfortunately, the kind of business we are in, technology is not simple. So you can't just create something very quickly and get feedback within a week. So what we've done in our program is the 3-month time frame is sort of like an iterative process where we are reaching out to our sponsors. We actually pair up the team with a sponsor So they're working with them, building something quickly, and trying to modify it over time. The thing that is missing from our program is really getting the insights in and doing a lot of user interaction, like who will actually use our technology. And that's something, unfortunately, we don't do right now, but we're really hoping to incorporate that. And the reason is most of our products are really, really technical. So just to give you an idea, so for example, if you're building a server, right? For that, we generally don't go directly to the consumers to go and sell those servers. We go to the OEMs. So we do understand that business really well, so we don't use the human-centered approach very well. But the other example that Qualcomm Labs recently introduced is called Gimbal, which is a contextual awareness platform. And that platform is pretty useless if our end consumers are not using it. If you're not using it and trying to figure out whether you're close to a grocery store and you need to buy milk and it automatically pings you, right? So for that, we use human-centered approach. But a lot of our technology-centric, we don't use human-centered, we use more of the lean startup model.
And we do have a lot of human factors folks and user experience team. Like I sit through, volunteer sometimes to sit through as one of their interviewees where they ask those types of questions. And a lot of times it's around some kind of mobile product. So there are people that, we have a pretty sizable group of human factors folks that work on this kind of stuff full time. It's just not tied directly to impact. We tap into them sometimes in purpose.
Yeah, and we expose our idea submitters to this approach, and then it's up to them how they want to leverage it. So for one of the ideas, they are going out right now and getting that feedback because it's really focused on developers and how they're going to use our toolkits. So us giving them feedback is not going to be useful. So they do that for that idea. So it's very, I would say, you have to opt in to leveraging these things.
I just point out real quick, this is usually a time where a lot of times we'll break up into discussion groups and stuff, but this is such great information. We're going to continue with this. If you need to leave, I mean, that's time to a lot of you might plan to leave. If you have to go, that's fine. Just, duck out the back. There's a sign-up sheet somewhere passing around. If you want to get on our email list, please go ahead and sign in there. And one last thing is thank you to Annette Mason who helped donate this webcam for our broadcasts. Anyway, so I'm going to stop interrupting now and get back to you.
Any other questions?
How do you communicate with people? With the email or something?
You mean in terms of
ideas exchange? How do I know that? I mean, how do you communicate? Is it the case point of view or just?
Do you mean for the program in general? Like when we submit an idea, what happens? Not necessarily the human factor. So what happens is that there's kind of two phases. So there's the open website. This is like idea management 101, if you will, right? Like there's an open collaborative website where if you submit an idea, anywhere in the world can see it if you set it up that way, right away. And you can open it, you can see what theme it's in if you've done that, you can see any comments, you can see attachments, all that kind of thing. We trigger an email back saying, thank you, this is the process, this is where the next steps will be. We have some alerts set up, just so that if someone comments on your idea, you're notified if you want to be. And if I subscribe to your idea, I'll make sure that I get an email as well, so I can keep the conversation going, because a lot of the commenting is what drives the communication and the shaping of the idea. And then as we actually have a sort of a workflow or a life cycle. So as an idea moves from one stage to the next, if it advances, there's communications that happen there that are automatic, but then there's also communications we do as a project team. And then unrelated to ideas, we have all different ways of communicating with folks about what's happening. If we have guest speakers coming in about the themes, if we have events that are going to be run, if we're doing hacks, whatever we're doing, we have physical and digital marketing mechanisms that we use to communicate. Was that your question?
Yes.
One of the other things we did in our first cycle was we held active brainstorming session around our themes. So essentially, we would have Stephen and Joan conduct these sessions where employees who might not have an idea but want to at least learn more about the theme, they come together. And then we sort of take them through not a full version of design thinking, but similar to that. We have our experts share insights from that particular theme, and then they break out into smaller groups and brainstorm on those ideas. So even if you don't have an idea, you come to this session, you learn about what this theme is, and then you come up with an idea, and then what we do is we have the UX people that Stephen was mentioning, they help record all the information, And either if there are interesting ideas, invention disclosure form that we want to file from there, or interesting ideas that come out of it, we submit that into our site after that session. So that's another mechanism that we use to generate ideas. Sorry.
Oh, how does a group get a chance to have something like this happen in their business? Like, let's say you're a small business, you wanted to have a design thinking workshop. Do you guys hire out, or are there people that do this? I mean, is there a book or a college seminar or a certification or something? Or?
So I would say the best bet is IDEO. They are just amazing, phenomenal, and running it with a smaller group. So they come and do this in Qualcomm twice a year with my program. We are hoping that we can do it on a global scale with them because they have offices everywhere. But we use IDEO extensively. I know that they have online seminars, and I can get you that information. The other thing is that in our company, we have the UX group, which is a user experience group. It's over, I would say, close to 30, 40 people, and all of them are trained in design thinking. And they were trained through IDEO workshops. So they help take the message. So exactly what Steven's doing right now, he's learned the design thinking principles. Now he's going to be teaching it to the rest of the employees throughout the years when we can't bring IDEO into the company.
And there's, depending on your, like IDEO can do pretty much anything. There are niche players that do design thinking around marketing campaigns, or if you're a software startup that's doing UX, there are people who come in and do that kind of thing.
A bunch of us here do public sector work. Is there a way you sort of see design thinking totally integrated into the public sector where you can't rely on compensation, you can't rely on idea ownership?
You can, whether it's design thinking or crowdsourcing or any of those things, like how do you get people to join in and do it? So there's, I've seen it, I speak to the crowdsourcing first, so I've seen, I shouldn't say this, I've heard of a couple of successful implementations, actually a couple on Spigot, where cities and municipalities have done that. I've seen when some of the federal agencies have done crowdsourcing with, I think they used IdeaScale, which was one that the Obama administration used when he first came into office to seek ideas. The challenge with that is that for crowdsourcing anyway, because that's the one that you can get out to the biggest number of people, it's really hard to not have it become like a forum of flame wars where you're like, how do we solve global warming? And then it's like, you know, is Obama born in the United States? And then there's no global warming, and it just evolves into this, like, you get to shut down, right? Or when, for instance, when Obama launched his, it was at 08, 09, right when like the worst of everything had just happened, and I think 2 of the top 5 ideas were about legalizing marijuana. There was one about, so they were pretty clear, how do we turn the economy around, all these things. And I mean, there were people a couple people put in some insightful comments about taxing marijuana, and it was like, there's this thing, but a lot of them were just like, yeah, dude, when it's wide open, it's really hard to manage that way. The design thinking is a little bit tougher because you're generally going to do that with a smaller group of people. So they'd probably be government insiders, which so kind of like open innovation inside of your group. So I've seen it like kind of across the spectrum, but I know that IDEO and other companies have worked extensively with government agencies to do that.
So two things. So sorry, 2 things. One, I can introduce you to the person who runs the innovation program for San Francisco City. I just met with her at a conference, and it was very interesting what SF is trying to do to get exactly that, like, to make their city more innovative, which I thought was really interesting. The second thing is in San Diego, we are starting with NSF grant. There's a Balboa Park initiative. It's called AOSL, which is Art of STEM Learning. And they're starting an incubator which is going to be focused on water purification. And the goal is literally not just solving water purification problem. The goal is actually how can you bring people from government sector, from technology sector, from education, all of them together for a period of time to actually solve a problem using multiple approaches, including design thinking, so that we can train all these different sectors in that area. And Jeff, I've actually shared your information with the lead for that program, so she'll be contacting you. So if that's something of interest for you to really see how you can apply this for public sector, you can certainly join that.
They work really well with like green initiatives or where you're trying to find ideas for these types of things work really well. I've seen that I didn't mention. Or how do you green the city? How do you do sustainability ideas? But everybody is willing to participate in that. You tend to not have so many plain words.
Okay, I just want to comment on that. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a compensation issue. I think people, it's a leadership issue. If you got the right leadership, regardless of whether it's private or public, people will come together to innovate and solve problems. So just a comment.
The one nice thing is you don't have to worry about revenue. It's the difference. One thing is that the other thing I'll say is these types of campaigns work way better for cost-saving initiatives or operational efficiency than they do for innovation, because it's easy. Shouldn't say that. It's not easy. It's much easier to say we could do this better, cheaper, faster. We could save energy by doing this, and you see really hard ROI metrics. A lot of companies that are trying to justify investments in software will promise a certain level of cost reduction, more than cover, 10x return on the cost of the software and the program by saving you money. Walmart was a good example. They have tons of data on what they save. And with the government, obviously cost is a concern, but you don't have the revenue side of it, where we make ideas that are compelling, nice ideas, but there's a certain sort of revenue. We can't take all of them forward, so there's some that we factor revenue potential into it, where I would have, with the government, you're probably going to be more focused on cost, and there's a lot of ways to focus on doing things more efficiently.
And you can check out the Starbucks Ideas Talk website or the Dell website. So they have open sort of crowdsourcing websites, because there they are directly in touch with the consumers. So for example, Starbucks came out with this challenge where it was like, design your next latte, what it would be and what it would contain. That's really simple, but everyone has a preference. So you would see people submitting their ideas and it getting rated. So those kind of crowdsourcing from, like green initiatives or anything else, I think it's easier to implement because people really care about it. People care about the coffee. So, seriously.
And my only follow-up question would be, a lot of the organizations some people in here work for are basically closed organizations. So you don't really care about crowdsourcing because you're never going to see crowdsourcing. So you're basically talking about 1,000 people in a room, or 10,000 or 15,000 people in a room, and that's your way to play with. And so I just always wonder, because I think everyone wants to think disruptively, how you incorporate that, how you incorporate design, incorporate. But
yeah, well, the leadership would need to say that if we have 20,000 people internally, there's 20,000 innovators, and we're going to ask very specific questions. So one of the ways you do it is you treat it like problem solving. Even if you're looking for innovation, but you're looking for solutions to a fairly specific problem. If you say, how do we just operate more efficiently? It becomes really difficult. If you say, how do we get another $1 billion in revenue? It becomes very difficult to find people that will review those ideas, to say, we care about that kind of thing, to guide people's thinking. But if you have a leader who says, I'm going to put a statement out there, and I think that I have, even though it's a closed group, I've got 5,000 people that I can tap into, you can do it. And then we've seen other cases where they say, let's do open government. Let's publish this to the city residents of the town and have them come up with their ideas. Design thinking tends to be, though, to your point, you need to have kind of smaller groups and do it in pockets. You're probably going to have a hard time doing 10,000 people at once. Yeah.
Well, just to piggyback on that, Gavin Newsom wrote a book called Citizenville, where he discussed, former mayor of San Francisco, discussing how he tried to innovate and just put transparency, put all the information out there, and let citizens start developing apps or whatever the case may be, and then that way that can start solving some problems. So I only started the book, but so far it's so good. So far it's good in terms of getting the leadership. Somebody like Gavin Newsom and Obama also did the same thing in terms of putting information out there, but I know the lead story kind of sidetracked it. But there can be benefits from putting information out there and seeking input from populations, large crowds.
And it comes down to leadership, because they did the open IT as well, where you could drill down at every contract that was being spent on federal IT money. It was Obama's first CIO, I think, that did it, or CTO. And I remember showing it at my company to the CIO or senior VP of IT. Was like, don't put that on there. I don't want to, we're not showing where we're spending our money, right? So the leadership thing does come back. You need to have people that are willing to do it.
I was wondering, since you've been at Pfizer and at Qualcomm, what you found to be the differences in implementing this sort of process?
Yeah,
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
You used to say good things about Qualcomm.
no,
Well, I mean,
no, there are
it's
differences.
interesting because especially one of the things I'm interested in is mobile health, which kind of
Right.
is in
Bridges
between
both.
both of those.
And yeah, it's sort of they're both sort of interested in it, but it's not, say, core to probably either company yet. The biggest difference was Pfizer, any pharma, they've got a 10 to 12 year innovation cycle minimum, right? Some of the cancer drugs can go faster, but that means from the time you come up with a concept, which is you're not going to get a crowdsourcing. You might get indications discovery, which is we've got a safe compound that we know works, we know the mechanism of action, we know what it targets. What are other targets for this that might be in different disease areas, right? That works pretty well. You can bring scientists in, and that there's actually literature that a former colleague of mine running innovation challenges, they found, I think they funded a phase 3 start from that. But you can imagine when you say let's innovate, right, on our core business, and your core business is a 10 to 12 year cycle, you're going to have a very hard time getting ideas relevant to your core business, like new chemical compounds or biological compounds, vaccines. And then if you do, it's a very, 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 very long time before you're going to see any of the fruits of that, right? And a lot of the people will be turned over and won't be there, and they'll go into a business unit. So that's probably, Qualcomm has some similar things where it's not like you can just take a technology and run it to market. But it is slightly different in that it seems like a much more rapid innovation cycle for the core technology. The mHealth is an interesting one. That's one that I could see both companies running challenges on, where you would, and in fact, I know that at least one of them has, and it's difficult though because it's not core and because it's risky. Even if there are good ideas, it's very hard to get someone to pick them up and turn them into products. So what you end up having happen a lot of times is ideas that come in that are actually pretty good ideas, but it's like, well, why should we run that? What's our competitive advantage? It's our core. Why couldn't someone else just come out and do that faster than we could, right? So that's also a similarity, I think, in that.
Yeah, actually, so John has done extensive work in mobile health, and if you just want Qualcomm's perspective, Joe, do you want to maybe address that?
Well, it's an area where I think there's a lot of great ideas, so you can definitely get everybody's opinion on it. Everybody has an opinion on how they want to manage their health and wellness or like chronic disease. But what's interesting is like, how do you turn that into innovation and actually find something that's going to allow you to get a return on your investment? And because the system operates in such sort of a deliberate fashion, let's say, where there's a lot of things that have to happen before you see adoption and people actually saying that they're going to pay for things that aren't related to just pure fitness type of devices. It just becomes kind of problematic within a business because then people think you're not being successful with it if you run an innovation program and then they don't see results. So I think in some of these cases, one of the key things you have to do is educate the population of people that are participating, and not just what an mHealth tool is, for example, but like how the system is set up so that when they think of an idea, they understand that in order for people to be able to use it, what are kind of the hurdles to adoption, or what is the medical or healthcare system set up to pay for, or what are the stakeholders in the insurances payers or the healthcare professionals willing to do in order to adopt it? What would that take? So it's like that bigger education has to happen along with running the program in order for you to actually see the fullness of the success. Otherwise, you get a lot of ideas and they get
Just the one other thing that's different is when I joined Pfizer, it was 2000. We just bought Warner Lambert for like $100-something billion. We bought Pharmacia, and we bought Wyeth and King and all these places. And so, even though that was being bought, we shrunk significantly. So it was like every 6 months there was like constant catastrophic org change.
right? So I think the numbers that came out were like 50,000 layoffs in 6 years or something like that, right? It's really hard to sustain any kind of program when you have that kind of churn and that kind of turnover and that kind of demoralizing, right? To see that. And the difference that I've seen here is that Qualcomm seems to, for the most part, be continually growing, right? And expanding into new areas, hiring. It's like, what's that H word? It rhymes with firing. I know that, but what's the H word? So that's it's not really related to this in particular, but I think it affects innovation if people kind of are shell shocked from that kind of constant reduction and change.
Yeah, well, it gets to that optimistic comment.
And I mean, there's still great innovation at Pfizer. In fact, since I left, every time I leave, their stock goes crazy. It's been, it's gone up 50% since I left a year ago. So, take that with a grain of salt. Okay, you said last question.
Yes.
Could you please change your slides to?
Yeah, I think we can.
We can share.
Yeah. Okay. We'll put it up on the Disruptive Thinkers website.
That's and anything you can give us free knowledge, I will really appreciate. Or even if you one of you, and I can tell you one thing that just you said that mobile phone could be used as a light torch. I am from India, but not from big city like Mumbai or New Delhi. I came from a village which I never saw a telephone until I went to Calcutta, and that's only phone that the principal had, because the professor or nobody had, and that's the first time I saw a telephone in my life. Now everybody in my village have a mobile phone. What you can do, I see horrible thing that I think, they say necessity is the mother of invention, as you said, this there India and a torch. I saw when in India have a 1.2 billion people and 400 million people have no electricity. Then I was thinking how they use their phones. And I charge my phone every day. And they told me a gentleman come with a battery, a car battery. I was surprised at how they invented themselves. The gentleman comes with a bicycle with a battery. And then he takes their phone and charge it, come back after 2 days. And those people then use their phone. They are just receivers. There are people or husband or son working in big cities, and they call only receive it.
Yeah.
So if you could help them, that at least they do not have to charge every alternative day, at least for a couple of days, that will definitely help your people, honestly.
So, that's a really good idea. We should discuss more because we are running out of time. So Qualcomm has something called as Qualcomm Wireless Reach. And the biggest thing about our program there is how can we provide cellular technology to areas that absolutely need it. And just one of the examples, we work very closely with the South India fishermen. We provide them cell phone technology so that they can figure out the weather patterns. They can figure out how much, should they even be going out in the sea and fishing. And let's say if they go out in the sea and they catch a lot of tuna or something, they can actually make all the trades on the phone. So what we've seen is through our wireless reach program, we've been able to impact their standard of living drastically. And our wireless reach program is actually, I would say, amazing because we work across the world to make these connections happen.
I just wanted to vouch for wireless reach. I work with them, and very good things they're doing with cell phone technology. And I did a case study on that. The fishermen, I think it was Indonesia or something.
Yes,
like that.
we did a second one, and we are doing a third one in Brazil recently.
From the tsunami, it was for safety, right? And then they started working with them and realized, no, wait, you could use this for a lot of other reasons as well to get your stuff to market.
Okay. Thank you very much for